is so good to be here and to have as our guest Marques Thompson of Democracy, North Carolina. He is a really good friend, and we're honored that he consented to come back. So I guess we didn't mess up too badly when he was here before. But we the people, and we emphasize that we the people are in charge of our government and not the other way around. The wonderful thing about Democracy in North Carolina is they too are all about we the people. And the work that they do is about empowering our communities. We had a little talk with ourselves about what we would name this segment, and I think it's voting is building the beloved community and building a community where we are voters and where we take charge and empower ourselves and those around us. And Marques, if I might call him that, is so empowered and working so hard on doing just that. I need to introduce him because you may not remember all of his accolades from last time, and I'll just give you a few of them, and then he'll introduce himself further, and then we'll start to talk about what's going on with voting. I'm sorry, I'm being a bit busy here. Um, he is the organizing director of Democracy North Carolina. And, one of the things I remember about his other appearance with us is, is that he mentioned that if you can get someone to vote, it is likely that they will continue to be voters. And that has stayed with me because we're in a we're in a situation right now where we need you to get out and vote those 3 times and become those voters. Marques has more than a decade of organizing experience, and he has gone to advanced training at Harvard University. He was raised in Eastern North Carolina, and he has dedicated himself to community service since he was a youth. Now, that's just a couple of the highlights that I want to mention, but I want Marques, Mr. Thompson, to really delve into his own background, and then we'll have a spirited discussion, we hope, on voting. So, what didn't I say about you?
Well, you said the most important things as far as being an organizer since my youth and really caring about the community. The only thing that I might add is that right now I'm coming to you from New Orleans at a conference that is being held by a funder that organizes people around the election protection work, and that's going to be very important this year to make sure that our elections are protected, to make sure that when you go to cast a ballot, that ballot will indeed count, and that hopefully that there's no one interfering, whether it be voter intimidation or an election official who is, doing the wrong thing as it comes to your ballot or not allowing your ballot to count when it really should and things like that. So we have our election protection program in place. And this year we're going to make sure that people, the people in yellow shirts are all around all our elections so that when people go to vote, if they have any problem whatsoever, they can be connected to our hotline at 888 our vote and talk to a lawyer or a law student and know what their rights are when it comes to their vote. And so I'm really excited to be in a space where we're learning from people all across the nation have come together to not only learn from one another, but to coordinate and to make sure that across the nation the vote is protected. And definitely here in North Carolina, Democracy North Carolina, Common Cause, all our partners, Blueprint, are working together to make sure that your vote is protected.
I'm glad that you're working on that because what was happening in Georgia with voting is, I think, scaring people, and then the Save Act is not really helping matters at all. We'll talk about those later in our program, but I wanted to start with having you explain what you do with Democracy North Carolina and how long you've been doing it.
Yeah, so I had started with Democracy North Carolina on staff in 2016. So 10 years on staff. Um, I was a volunteer for many years before that with Democracy North Carolina. I volunteered with other organizations. I worked with other organizations organizing before I got on staff. But I've been here 10 years. And what Democracy North Carolina does is we fight for voting rights. We fight to make sure that the elections in North Carolina are run correctly, that administratively people follow the law, people follow the rules as far as how voting is supposed to happen, and that the public knows the rules, that the public knows what they are supposed to do when it comes to voting. And so they are equipped with all of the things they need to know to vote. Where should I vote? Who's on my ballot? We educate the public on all those things. And then, like I said, behind the scenes, we're fighting to make sure that there are strong early voting plans where so that the early voting sites are in places where people are. Oftentimes, people of color, they will try to move the voting site so that people of color can't access it. We saw that in A&T just a few months ago, where there was the students there asked for a polling place, and they were denied a polling place on campus. So we
Oh.
are in the fight for things like that to make sure that they have a voting site in the general election, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So we're often behind the scenes making sure that the elections run the way that they should, but then we also are public facing to help people to vote, know where to vote, and to have the access to the elections.
I'm curious, given all of what you just said, and what your challenges are in making sure we have the vote that we really deserve and want. How has your work changed over the last few
Yeah.
years?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing that has happened is that things that used to be just kind of vanilla, middle of the road, boring ideas like one vote, one person, one vote, everybody's vote should count. Excuse me, democracy is something that is what we, as Americans, that's something that we all are in favor of. Well, now, if you say I'm for democracy, in some spaces, that's a partisan lean. That's kind of
Mhm,
a
mhm.
leftist type thing where, that used to be, everybody on every side of every issue believed that democracy was the way forward. Now there's people believing in authoritarianism and this kind of thing. And so actually saying I'm in favor of people voting um, is it can be considered, telling your political affiliation or whatever. It has become partisan to be in favor of democracy, and that's a big shift. That has hurt our work a bit. Another thing that has changed is that intimidation has become a much realer threat than it ever has in the past. I mean, people threaten, um, to intimidate voters. They threaten to say, we're going to be at the polling places. We're going to have guns. We're going to intimidate people. They almost will say it directly, like that's their intention. And another thing that has changed over the years is that now we have had people in the past. What voter suppression would look like is we are going to make it harder for people to vote by like moving the polling place or by limiting the amount of early voting days, things like that.
Mhm.
Now, when we talk about voter suppression, they will say, we've had people in the Griffin situation actually say, yes, I know you voted, I know you're registered to vote, and you voted, but I think your vote shouldn't count. And we're going to go
Mhm.
to court to try to say your vote shouldn't count, or to say that people shouldn't have the ability to vote, that people that registered and do the rest, trying to question their citizenship or question their ability to vote. And that has been happening now, much, to a degree that never has happened in the past. So that truly complicates our work.
What is as community residents, are we able to do about things like that? I just remember the election with, I think, Justice Riggs, where all of these votes were, so many people were challenged, and if it had succeeded, there would have been a lot of people who were disenfranchised. So how can we help ourselves to to stay on the voter rolls and then to vote and have that vote counted?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that is the question. So, number one is to always be checking your registration status. So, every year around this time, we are calling people to remind them that the election is happening and allowing them to vote. So, we ask people to go to ncvoter.org and check your registration status to make sure that everything's okay and make sure nothing crazy has happened. And then to stay in contact with organizations like Democracy North Carolina, get on our email list and things. So when it comes to like that Griffin situation that you just mentioned, we called all our members to make sure that, or our advocates to make sure that if any of them were on the list, and we had about 575 people who were on our members of Democracy North Carolina or advocates for Democracy North Carolina on our mailing list that were actually
That's a
having
lot
their
of people
vote.
consider. I'm sorry, that's a lot of people considering that in the final analysis, the vote was so close.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Those elections are won and lost. So the last two elections have been won by 700 some votes, and then 500. I mean 400,
Wow.
475, and one to almost 500. So yeah, that can be the margin of error out of 5 million votes. Those less than 1,000 votes will decide it, and they
Yeah.
challenged over 105,000 votes across the state. So we called all our people, but then we were helping our partners and ourselves were calling people who were, not in the know, as it were, not in on our email list and things to make sure that they know that they knew that their name was being or was on a list of people whose votes were being challenged. Now, fortunately, there was lawsuits and this and that, and legally they were able to beat that back. But because of that challenge, there are still now people's ballots that we are letting them know that they are in a state where the Board of Elections will want them to give information about their social security number or their driver's license before they would let their vote count. So that's real
Really?
damage that has been done. Yeah, so people still need to go to the North Carolina State Board of Elections website and check to make sure that your name is not on that list. You can probably link to that list also by going to ncvoter.org and or Democracy North Carolina. Any we are doing all we can to make sure that people know the issues, know the dangers and the threats to their vote, and that they are able to do something about it. So yeah, that's how we protect ourselves by staying in the know, because at the end of the day, that is what politicians who do these types of things are counting on, is that eventually what they're doing, enough people won't know about it to actually
Hmm.
be able to stop it. And that's what they're counting on.
Are local nonprofits and churches involved with the organizations and your partner organizations to alert people to what's going on and then to help them straighten it out? For example, if you find that your name is not on the voter registration list and you know you registered, what can you do?
Well, when there's an election that's happening right now, the thing you can always do is to vote early, go to early voting, because if there's any problem with your registration status or if there's any problem whatsoever, we can get it fixed through an early voting situation. So you can actually register to vote if you haven't already registered and vote on early voting. And definitely if there's any issue or whatever, you have the time to get it resolved. So that's why we always encourage people to vote early, to make sure that they're good. But to your larger question, as far as what people can do, we also have to make sure that if you are not on the list, you got to be your brother's keeper, so to speak. You got to check and make sure your neighbors, your friends, and we have seen that where churches will we'll have a session with churches or with sororities or fraternities or whatever. And the whole goal is not only to check all of the membership of the church or the sorority or the fraternity, but also have everyone check their mom, their dad, their brothers and sisters, their friends, to make sure that we are looking out for one another. Those of us that know have to be ambassadors and have to be, go, bro, our brother's keeper for those that maybe don't have the information. We can definitely be filling the gap for our brothers and our family.
We've talked about people who really want to vote, and some of them mostly are registered. There are a few who might not know that they're not registered. But what I wonder is, for those folks who are not planning to vote, what are some of the reasons that they might give for not voting or not being interested in voting?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, we hear all kinds of reasons, but a lot of the reasons, the real number one reason why people don't vote is because they don't know who's on the ballot and what those people do. Like they literally don't know um, what the stakes are for the election. So I was just talking to a lady yesterday because we were phone banking, and she said, I asked her if she was going to vote in the election. She said no at first, and I said, well, and I knew that because the hesitation, I had a feeling that she wasn't sure that there was one, or she didn't know previous to my phone call. So I said, "Have you heard about this election? I know it's hard because it's a primary." And she said, "Yeah, I didn't know. What are we even voting on?" And so then I was able to say, "Well, here's some of the people that are going to be on the ballot. This is the primary. You're going to have to vote again in the general election." And gave her resources so she could see who was on her ballot. And then she was like, "Okay, yeah, I will vote now because now I know." So that's the number one barrier: people not knowing who's on the ballot, that the election is happening. Those really fundamental things, because they advertise a football game a million times, before the game or
Yes.
whatever, but or a
Yeah.
movie or whatever, but they don't advertise elections. It's possible for you to go and unless you see a sign or something, not know an election is happening, depending on how you're moving. So that's the number one barrier, is people not knowing that it's happening or who to vote for and that kind of those really basic things. But then the second thing that we find, that's statistics show that all kinds of polling has shown that that's the number one barrier. The
Mhm.
second barrier is a bit more complicated, but and probably a harder problem to fix, which is there has been so much information and discouragement that people often feel like their vote doesn't matter.
Mhm.
And we just talked about a Supreme Court race that came down to less than 1,000 votes. A state Supreme Court race that came to less than 1,000 votes after millions of votes being cast. So your vote definitely counts. It matters. In North Carolina, definitely it matters. All our elections for governor and even the president and all those kind of things are somewhat narrowly won. But then you have like local elections. You have the election for county commissioners, city council, sheriff, all of these things that are in your local community. We have had elections that have been ties where they had to flip a coin to decide the election. We had about 9 to 11, I forget the exact number, of elections that were decided by less than 10 votes on a local level. So that
Less than
happens
10
all the time.
votes? Less than
Less
10
than
votes?
10 votes. Less than 10
Really?
votes. Yeah. So your vote matters, but people are not aware of that. So they have this idea that, my vote doesn't matter. And the last thing that I would say that kind of combat that theory of your vote not mattering is, even sometimes we can have a very I would say a corporate type thought process when it comes to voting. Like it's like, if I do this, then this is gonna happen. Like I'm gonna vote and then I wanna get this outcome. And we sometimes would frame it that way. Like if you want, better, if you want like gun laws or whatever, vote for this person or what, sometimes campaigns will frame things in that kind of, you know, action reaction type scenario. But the truth of the matter is that regardless of the outcome of any one particular election, the power of your vote is really your signal that you give to the political process about your preferences and about your presence. If by voting you put up a sign that says, I am here and
Mhm.
you need to care about my voice because I'm exercising my power. And it can be just a few people. So I think about this all the time. Battleground states. A lot of times people think about things from a national framework and presidential elections and this and that, red states and blue states. We're nonpartisan, so we don't operate under that paradigm. But if even if you were to think about things from that perspective, the landscape, the political landscape changes all the time. Red states become purple states, become blue states, and vice versa. But
Mhm.
every time that happens, it started with people holding up a sign saying, I'm here. And then people know, oh, there's 10 of you. Oh, you know what? Now there's 15. Oh, now there's 35. Now, and even like that, things can change. But if all those people that say, hey, I'm in a blue state and I'm a Republican and, and nobody, there's no need for me to vote, well, then you never tell the system that you're there. It could be a lot of you. You don't know. So you got to always engage in the system so that the system knows that you're there. And then either way, you matter. You matter to the system, whether you're get your outcome or not, because the politicians know that they know the margin. So they know, like, even if I won my election, but if I won it by, like we were just talking about that 1,000 point election, 1,000 vote
Mhm.
election. So someone knows, okay, I might have lost this election, but just 500 votes more, I would have won. So you you voting always matters because you're showing that you're here. And if you show that you're there, you have to be dealt with. You have to be taken into the calculation. And so that's
Mhm.
what we tell people to do. Like, you got to let power know that you're there. That's your power. That's your voice. Your vote is your voice.
One of the things that I questions I was going to ask you um, has to do with, and we've been talking about this already. How do we make sure that the people who are elected to represent us actually represent us? They they have our best interest and not somebody else's that's been told, you should vote so and so. How do you make up your own mind about what you should be doing, how you should be voting, how you understand what your vote accomplishes? Um, and just a little bit of why it is that we sometimes hesitate
Mhm.
to make those kinds of decisions, to understand what's going on in our community. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So one thing that we do say, again, I was talking about like the framework of, voting for a particular outcome. But the reality is, in order for our democracy to work properly, it takes more than just voting. So it does take you to know what's going on and maybe to you asked the question, how do we make sure that they listen to us and not someone else? It's by making
Yeah.
sure that we are engaging with them even after they're in office. So there are a number of times that we will call politicians, we'll write letters to them to let them know, hey, we want you to vote this particular way on this issue. Or if they don't listen to us and we say, hey, we're mad about this and we're going to let everyone know you voted this way and we don't think that's good and we think the people don't think that's good. And so now the
Mhm.
people have the information they need to make decisions in other elections. Again, we don't endorse anyone or whatever, but we do make sure that the public knows what every elected official has done. Like, we try our best to let them know so that now you can make a decision according to your values. Because here again, that's what people are counting on is that people won't know, and so then they won't do it. So calling people, calling elected officials, writing letters, going to meetings, and letting your voice be heard. There, all of those matter. They actually do affect the decisions that politicians make. And then after the fact, being willing to hold our elected officials accountable in the next election and say, you know
Mhm.
what,
Mhm.
you have not been a good representative. It's just like anything else. You work for us, and you're not willing to do what we are asking you to do and represent us. Then we I'm sorry, but we have to find someone else that will.
That's one of the things that Bishop Barber talks about all the time. And it's that there's certain segments of the population where their their needs are not being met. And I think that was one of the reasons he had that big march. What was it, last weekend? From Wilson to Raleigh to talk about affordability issues, yes, but also to help people understand that their voice matters, their vote counts, and to not neglect that. And I think that's one of the wonderful things that democracy, North Carolina, really does. You have some great resources on your website. Um, in fact, you might want to talk a little bit about some of those resources because they're really very helpful.
Well, thank you, and we're glad that you found them helpful. And I would say I was just talking to a lady in Fayetteville who runs a food bank, and she says like every time they do the food bank, they give literature to people about a number of things about
Hmm.
what's happening locally, but also about their elections that they use those materials. So some of the things that we have that I think people um, will find useful right now is our what's on the ballot document. So it talks about all the positions of who's on the ballot and what they do. Like what does the governor do? What does the state board of the state Supreme Court? That's on the ballot. The sheriff, all of the different races, county commissioners. What do they do? The General Assembly is on the ballot. So that we've got that material there, so you can get a sense of what are the actual races that are up for grabs or that are going to be on your ballot this year. We also have information about like voting, so like photo ID, what kind of IDs do you need to bring? What happens if you forget your ID? You can fill out an exception form, so we go through the process of that. So that is something that I think is very helpful too. And then we have some just general information about like registering to vote or voting, early voting, election day voting, what things you need to have in mind. And I think the last thing I'll mention is we talk about things like felon. We have material around felony voting, so folks that might be felons. What are you able to vote? When can you vote if you have served your felony sentence? What has to be the criteria? Is you not a felon? And making sure people are very clear on that situation. So a lot of the information that we have is designed to make sure that you are well equipped to be able to vote and to know to have confidence that you know what's going on when it's time to vote and that you can vote with confidence. The last thing I'll mention, we don't have this as a material physically, but we have a digital voter guide that just came out a few weeks ago. So with that, you actually can put in your address and you can see all the candidates that will be on your ballot and what they have done, what they stand for, their positions on different issues. So you can literally build out your ballot and say, like, I'm going to vote for this person, that person, and then know precisely who is supporting your issues so that you know who you need to vote for in the process.
That sounds like a really handy tool. I hadn't seen that. The other thing I'll mention is that you have a couple of languages on your site, so you're not limited. If you can't understand English, there are other languages that you have access to and can still understand voting and citizenship and democracy and such. Yesterday, I always wear my earrings. Don't have them today. That says vote. Anyway, I was talking to the young lady at the grocery store, and I asked her if she was registered to vote. First, I asked her if she was going to vote. She said, "I'm not old enough to vote." I said, "How old are you?" She said, "I'm 17, but in May I can vote." So talk about what it takes to have young people engaged and and ready to vote.
Yeah, that's so great that you talked to someone about that. So one thing to know is that if you are 17 years old and you're going to be able to vote in the upcoming election, you can go ahead and get registered like right now. So and then when it's time to vote, she's ready to go. So yeah, that's great that you're doing that. So we get young people involved a couple of ways. We have our DIM Summer fellowship internship, so we literally will take young people from the different schools to apply, and we're going to like train them in things like organizing, comms, whatever. So that's one way that we are literally training the next generation of advocates and organizers to do this work. And then they definitely go back to their colleges and they go back to their universities and things, and then continue to work on campuses. So again, we need the young people leading the young people, and and then helping the young people. So that's a big way. We've been doing that for over 20 years, and seeding the ground in the young community. We also have a new program called our Bridge program, where we recognize not everyone is able to go to college. Not everyone, that's not the path for everyone. So we can, but people who graduated from high school but want to know more about how they can get involved, they can be part of our Bridge program. It's another fellowship or internship, so to speak. It's a bit longer than summer, which is just for the summer, 2 months. The Bridge program goes from 6 to 9 months, and they were able to be taught about community organizing, and then are able to help their community the same way that the Democracy Summer interns do. And last but not least, I would say we are very supportive of having presence in colleges, even in high schools or like in clubs and things like that. So we are constantly trying to make sure that we are educating the public, especially our youth, on their democracy.
That's exciting. When she said, "I'm not ready to vote, I'm not eligible to vote yet because I'm not 18, but I'm registered, and so when I in May I can register, I can vote." I said, "That's pretty exciting," and like you said, we need to make sure that our young people are voter ready. Um, we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back in a few minutes. We are talking with Marques Thompson of Democracy in North Carolina. He's our guest, and he's Director of Organizing for Democracy North Carolina. And we'll return to our discussion in just a moment. You might ask, what's next for Voices of We the People? Well, I'm really excited to continue our discussion on voting, but also more specifically, the power within us to make changes. Our guest next time is Dr. Gloria Brown Marshall. She has written this great book. She, by the way, is professor of constitutional law at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. And she teaches constitutional law and race and the law. And we are honored to have her as our next guest. She's written this great book, A History of Protest in the United States, and where she singles out how people have empowered themselves and sometimes others have empowered them to make changes in their communities, in their lives. And it's changes big and small, and changes you would not have thought you were able to make. I was looking at this quote from Rosa Parks, and one of the things she said is, "I didn't know I was making history. I was just tired." And that's a lot of what some of our people do. They just are tired. They can't. They said this is not right, and so they go on and make changes themselves. So we look forward to that discussion. Really, really grateful and honored that she will join us. Um, the other thing I want to say is this is Black History Month. So let me share with you a couple of things about Black history. Sorry about that. A few things about Black history. One is key milestones. They include the 1925 birth of lawyer and U.S. Representative Louis Stokes and the 1979 promotion of Frank E. Peterson Jr. to Brigadier General, making him the first Black general in the United States Marine Corps. Then there are other things going on, like the birth of the NAACP and the co-founder of NAACP, uh, Mr. Du Bois. Okay, now let me get back to our discussion with Mr. Thompson. Welcome back. And I just want to mention that we're going to change the subject just a little just to have us think a little differently about the voting and the influences that we have, the things that influence our voting that we may not be aware of. For example, um, you mentioned the website, Democracy North Carolina, mentions voter suppression and the tools that are often used in voter suppression and the impact of those tools on the outcome of our election. And we all know one of them, which is money. Money comes into the to various elections, and you cannot believe how much money is being brought into uh, elections. When we return, Marcus is going to talk a little bit about voter suppression tools and what's going on, and he's going to talk about gerrymandering and the impact of that on our elections. And not just our elections, but our well being, because we end up having people who don't necessarily care about us particularly, but they're elected because um, they're able to say, vote for me. I am the person who supports you. And we may not have understood that that means they're the person who is supporting themselves and not us. So, welcome back. And I'm welcoming back Mr. Thompson too, Marcus. And just to reintroduce him, he's the organizing director of Democracy North Carolina. Talk about, if you would, we're changing the subject. Talk about voter suppression and how we experience it and may not know that that our vote is being suppressed.
But yeah, so one thing that we already talked about is how people will, politicians will um, suppress your vote with challenges that you may not be aware of, by putting things in place, moving polling places. These are kind of subtle things that politicians do to suppress your vote. But a thing that we do talk a lot about is gerrymander. This is another way that the power of your vote is suppressed. When we have politicians who will pick their voters instead of the voters picking the politicians, then this is a way that politicians try to reduce the power of the voters. And we just saw this happen in North Carolina in District 1 and District 3, where they actually redrew the district lines for no reason whatsoever but for a partisan gain, for so that they could increase the political party in charge so that they were able to gain another seat. And so what they basically did was the way that people gerrymander is they either will pack voters in the same district altogether to reduce their power, so that instead of people having influence over one or two or even three particular districts, they pack all of those particular voters, particularly voters of color, into one district so that they can only influence that one district. Another thing they do, and this is what they kind of did in this case, is that they are crack voters, or what we call cracking. So they will reduce, they'll divide up. So if you have a large population of black people, or a region that a lot of
Excuse
black
me a
people
minute.
live in,
Did you say crash voting?
cracking, they call it cracking the
Cracking.
vote.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
They call it packing and cracking is what they do to reduce the power of voters. And so what they'll do is, if you have a large area where you've got people of color in a large region, they will divide that region up among many different districts. So for again, A&T has been the poster child of a lot of this stuff. So what they did in A&T a few years ago is that, A&T is one campus. They actually drew a line right in the middle of the campus and divided, put one half of the campus in one district and the other half in another district, in order to reduce the power of that vote. So that's what we call cracking. And so they did that in District 1 this year, which happens to be my district, where they were able to take black voters and to spread them out into District 3 to reduce the power of those black voters. because they did not like the fact that they voted differently than they wanted them to. And so they said, you know what? We are going to reduce the power of these people. We're going to change the makeup of this of the map and the makeup of this district, and we hope that it's going to allow us to gain partisan power, and that's what they literally did last year. And it has been a really tragic situation for District One where I live, because that district typically is what we call in the black belt, and
Mm-hmm.
voters like myself have been able to vote for people that we felt like represented us. And now they have tried to reduce that power by gerrymander. And that's something that if you're not aware of, what's been going on, you'll show up at the polling place and you find yourself in another district. Then you haven't moved, but the maps have moved around you. And so now your power, you can find that your power is slightly reduced. So that is another thing that's going on in North Carolina, and we just experienced it last year.
You know, now this is something that I feel is just diabolical. The SAVE Act, and I
Mm-hmm.
know that a lot of people haven't quite understood it, even if they've heard about it, and at the same time, a lot of people have not heard about it. So, could you talk about what it is and how it will affect us if it's passed, and what we can do to try to prevent it being passed?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to say that, and it has changed a bit since the first time they introduced it, but ultimately what it seeks to do is to make a person have to prove their citizenship before they're able to register to vote by providing a document like a birth certificate or a passport before you're able to vote. And so we know that there are costs that are associated with a passport. We know that many people don't have their birth certificate. And then you think about who is really going to affect is women who have changed their name and this kind of thing, because now they have to go back and show that that their situation and prove that they're able to vote, that they are a citizen because of that name change. And so it's really going to affect a lot of people. It's really going to be very detrimental. We actually believe that white women are going to be affected greatly. Definitely, women of color will as well. But anyone that has changed their name, or anyone that can't find don't have a passport, which is a lot of Americans, a lot of North Carolinians, or anyone that doesn't have their birth certificate, will likely, will potentially not be able to get registered to vote. So it's a terrible, and the reason why it's so bad is because the uh, the rationale for it is that they say that they're trying to prevent immigrants from voting. When all the statistics and all the data we have show that that does not happen, that's not a concern. But they are saying that that's a concern, and so they are trying to hurt folks with that.
One of the statistics I read about the SAVE Act is about 53% of us have passports. And it, as I understand it, so I'm not an expert on this at all, but as I understand it, if you try to register someplace else, even if you registered where you live and then you move, then you have to go through the same act of trying to re-register and have identification and that sort of thing. That's just and it's expensive, and many people don't have the money to either get a passport, or they might not be able to get to the DMV to get an acceptable ID. And I think if it passes, it will have the desired effect of really suppressing the vote. The
Yeah,
other
absolutely.
Yeah, the other thing is that we can galvanize ourselves because the act has not passed yet. It passed the House and it's in the Senate now. The Senate has not passed it, so it's not law. Um, and so maybe you could help us to be more active and tell us what might help so that the act does not pass?
Yeah. So the number one thing we can do now is let our representatives, our senators, know that we are not in favor of this, and they should not vote for it. And I will say, what we have been told in the past is that there was not a strong likelihood, there were not enough votes for it to pass the Senate. But if they were to get rid of the filibuster in order to pass that measure, then we will have a real problem. So it's still up in the air what the outcome will be. But the thing we're asking people to do is to contact your senator and be very clear that you're not in favor of this, and that you do not support them voting for the state.
Are there resources to help people, like craft letters and make calls and things like that? Are you familiar with any resources that might help?
So we definitely have talking points that will help people to. If you go to our website, you'll hear us. You'll see information about the Save Act and our talking points. But it's pretty simple as far as contacting your representative and letting them know that you. I mean, you don't have to go into the talk. Sometimes talking points and things are good, but the best thing to do is just come right off the cuff and say, the way you feel about this issue, as honestly and truly as you can, and that does have an effect on people. In fact, even people of other parties, they recognize when the public is against something. If we can talk with one voice, then we can beat this back. And we are lobbying elected officials, and definitely our partners are doing that as well to let them know that this is not going to help anyone. There's no need to do this. There's
Mhm.
no threat of immigrants voting or anything like that. But what this would do is just hurt the people, basically of North Carolina, but all over the country that want to participate in their democracy.
One of the things that occurs to me is that we're experiencing a lot of fear. People don't want to go out to vote because they are concerned that their vote won't count, or they're concerned that they might encounter law enforcement. People are concerned. What can you say to help us overcome our fears and go ahead on and make the changes, go out and vote, and and be confident that we can make change? How can
Yeah,
you lead us?
it's a great question. So I will say that Democracy North Carolina has been meeting with our partners all the time. In fact, that's part of what I'm doing here in New Orleans now is to talk about some of the threats that are happening to our democracy when it comes to things like ICE or voter intimidation, and then how we can like meet the moment and make sure that people are safe. So the thing that I will say is that we are going to have in this definitely in the general election, excuse me, we are working to make sure that in every county, there are going to be places where we will have people, advocates, people on the ground that will be there to make sure that people can feel safe, whether it be
Mhm.
safe sites or parties at the polls or whatever it is. We're going to make sure that it's an environment where there are a number of people there to make sure that that people who are afraid of ICE. And what's crazy is because people who are not immigrants have concerns about ICE because they've been just grabbing people indiscriminately. It's American citizens and everyone else. Anyone that looks a certain way, they want to threaten. So we're going to make sure that there are sites that are safe for people and that they know that it's safe for them to vote. And then in all across the state, we're going to have places where people are gathered there to make sure that they can vote safely, and that if anyone does, do something threatening or something that they shouldn't be doing, that we can
Mhm.
alert the state board of elections, the boards of elections, and make sure that gets taken care of, because we want people to know that they can vote despite what people are trying to say to scare them, that their vote still matters and that we're here to protect that vote and they'll be able to vote safely.
That's really, really helpful to know. The other thing is, as we close, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about something that concerns you most, whatever that is, or something that gives you joy as you
Yeah.
go about doing your work.
Okay, you're right. I love it. I'll talk about both in connection because I think the real threat, the most important threat that we really face is that we as the public give up on our democracy. If we give up on the power that we have, if we stop believing that our vote will matter and that the things that we do matter and we just throw our hands up, that's what they want us to do. That's what everything is designed to make us feel, to feel defeated, to feel fear, and to give into it. But the thing that I'm most excited about is that more than ever, people are taking charge and saying, I'm not afraid and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure my voice is heard. And you see it again, I'm here in a conference, you see it all across the country, definitely in North Carolina. People are learning about what has been done to hurt their power and to suppress their vote. I'm saying we are not going to take it lying down. And so the scripture the best selling book that I read says that what they counted for evil, God meant for good, and God can turn it around for good. And so that's what we literally see happening. The thing, even in those districts where they gerrymander, you see a swell of people saying, "Okay, you gerrymandered my district, but I'm going to vote anyway. I'm going to make sure that you regret doing that." So people are rising up all across the nation, definitely in North Carolina, and that is definitely the thing that gives me hope.
That's amazing and so inspiring. I want to thank you, Marcus, for sharing your time. And even if you're in New Orleans, which I wish I were too, and and that you broke away from your conference, but it sounds like a conference that is very well needed, and hopefully we'll be able to talk more specifically about what you learned in your conference. And thank you for a very robust and encouraging discussion, and especially the lessons that you've learned and that you share every day for coastal North Carolina, eastern North Carolina. How can people reach you?
Well, you can always reach me at marques at democracync. That's my .org. That's my email address. You can also reach me at 252-508-9575. That's my office number. But if you go to the website and you want to find me, you're able to talk to the organizing director. And I also get any types of, if you just click on the website, contact us. I often will get things directed to me that go there. So I'm easy to get to. You get to the website, you can get to me. But also we have meetings across the state, and so you can get them mobilized and go to the website and see our meetings and our events, and I'll be there. And definitely looking forward to meeting people all across the state.
I thank you. And by the way, that's how I met you. I was looking on your website. I said, organizing, we the people, we need to talk. And you called back. So please um, contact Marcus at Democracy North Carolina, and you'll see the phone number and the email address just in case you didn't get it today. Um, And to our audience, don't forget to go to our website, voicesofwethepeople.com, and give us feedback on today's program. You can also suggest future topics and guests. Most of all, you can support our work with your donations and sponsorships. Our site, our website will provide further information. Um, I think that we have come to the end of our journey, but not our resolve and not our commitment. And talking with Marcus is always inspirational to me, and I know he will be inspirational to you. Before we leave, I need to thank our team, Tamika Robinson, who is our podcast manager and our director and our inspiration for doing this. And she's an all-around terrific person who knows technology. Since I don't, I'm in awe of that all by itself. And my husband, who is our technical advisor. And I want to leave you with this thought. Reverend Dr. King believed in the ability to change society through the power of our vote. The great irony of our present moment, he thought, is that both of those precepts, peaceful change and voting rights, are under assault and threatened in America as never before in our lifetimes. We need to keep that in mind, and we need to understand this is a critical election for so many reasons. I have enjoyed presenting our podcast. I have enjoyed speaking with Marcus so much, and I'm saying thank you to everybody who's listening, and to say we'll see you next time where we'll be talking with Dr. Gloria Brown Marshall. Thank you so much for joining us.